Hey guys, so I hope that everybody had a good Passover on Thursday or a good Friday, a happy Easter, all that with your family on Sunday. And let's go ahead and let's jump into chapter 3. Before we do that, I just wanted to remind you guys that if you need anything, just please reach out and let me know. If you need any help with an assignment, you know that I'm always here through Schoology. And yeah, just let me know. My hours are still 12 to 3 for my classes, so but you know that I respond like at all hours of the day. If I'm available to, right? Like if I'm not like in the middle of something. I hope that you guys are staying safe. I am meaning to post like a separate video regarding like just some updates and like a little bit of like how to take care of yourself, how to like center yourself. But that'll be more to come. So let's go ahead and let's jump into chapter 3. For chapter 3, your final quick write for this series is a Benjamin Franklin quote. So he said, he who sacrifices freedom for security deserves neither and will lose both. So what does this mean? What does it mean to possibly give up your freedom because you're looking for security? What is it that you're giving up? What is it that you are losing along the way? How is it that by giving up your freedom, you are somehow losing your sense of liberation because you've traded it in some way for security, and then that security isn't even there for you anymore? I think about the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act that was passed shortly after 9/11 under President George W. Bush, where it essentially was passed by Congress, and it essentially gave the government the right to listen in on your phone conversations, to track emails, to track your internet searches for keywords that they believed signaled that you were engaging in acts of terrorism, or that can lead you to someone that they could then target for acts of terrorism. The problem with the Patriot Act is that it got so broad that anything was then seen as an act of terrorism, even though terrorism has a very specific definition. And so it was therefore exploited by our government to spy on its own citizens. You are giving up your freedom under the guise of security, but then you lose that sense of security. You're losing a sense of security when anything was defined as terrorism. The Black Lives Matter movement has been, and its activists who have spoken up against police brutality have been deemed terrorists, which is crazy. And so you're losing your sense of security because that definition of terrorism has become so broad. And along the way, you've also traded in your freedom for the security that you no longer have. So he who sacrifices freedom for security deserves neither and will lose both. What does this mean? How does the sacrifice of this right to freedom lead to the loss of both rights? The right to freedom and the right to security. So that'll be your last quick write, and then you guys are going to be submitting it. I already posted it up for you yesterday. Let me just navigate my way back to English. Just click that one right here. You can find it on the side, but more specifically, you can find it underneath your daily PowerPoints folder, Quick Writes 11 through 15. You'll see it right there. You can just go ahead and upload it, and already there are people who have been uploading their quick writes. So highly recommend that you go ahead and knock that out, get it out of the way, and jump right into it. So it's important to know for chapter 3 that this isn't really about like discussion questions. There are some discussion questions, but it's really just based on an activity that you guys are going to be doing. We're going to be getting you thinking about the concepts and the processes of rules and rights and fairness and what makes a society successful. So because of this, I highly recommend that you guys are watching this. Otherwise, the whole point of Animal Farm, the whole point of this political fable that is supposed to parallel the Russian Revolution, but is really so necessary in order to analyze all kinds of totalitarian regimes. Whether we're talking about communism, we're talking about socialism, we're talking about capitalism. So it's really meant to critique totalitarian regimes overall, regardless of their political or their economic stance, and you're doing it through this animal fable. So if you guys don't go through the critical thinking process of rights versus, like, rules in society versus rights, and then how that either upholds or violates the functions of society, then you're kind of like, you're missing the point. There isn't going to be a USA test prep this week. And again, if any of the grades that I gave you were wrong, please send me a screenshot as a private message of the assignment title, the due date, and the date completed. It is not helpful for me, and I've already addressed this with some of you. It is not helpful for me for you to be like, Miss, you gave me a 0. Honey, I already told you that you needed to, one more time, send me a screenshot in a private message of the assignment title, the due date, and the date completed. It doesn't help me for you to be like, Miss, you gave me a Z on USA test prep. I don't know what USA test prep assignment you're talking about. I don't know if it's because you did it past due. I don't know, and therefore I did it like way past due, and therefore I didn't accept it. I don't know if it's because, again, it was one of those things where you guys have been telling me throughout the year that it takes a week. That's why I delayed in putting in your USA test prep grades, because you guys have informed me that it takes a week for your assignment to move into the graded part of your USA test prep. And so for some of you, it might show on my end as if it, like, there's no grade there. It wasn't completed. There's literally no number there. And for others, you might have the grade, like you might have the correct score there, which is great. And for even others of you, it might just be your first attempt. Remember that you always have 2 attempts. So all that I need, like I've said, like I've written, like I've done all year long, is for you to send me the screenshot of the assignment title so I know which assignment it is that you're talking about, the due date so that I can see it right there rather than having to go into the system and all that stuff. And then in your screenshot, make sure that you show me the date that it's completed so that I can give you the grade that you earned. And again, just sending me a message saying that Miss, you gave me a Z on a USA test prep isn't helpful. Okay? So, on a sheet of paper, as we move forward to the lesson, I want you to go ahead and to think about what the founders of the Declaration of Independence, who had to create the new laws of the land. You know, they have this American Revolution against their British colonizers, though they themselves are part of that, against their British colonizers, and they now have to begin to form a society from scratch, right? What are the laws of the land going to be? What are the functions of society going to be? What are the rules that we're going to have? And which rules are unalterable? We kind of went over that word last time in the previous chapter. What rules are unalterable? Are we not allowed to change? So think about the founders of the Declaration of Independence or other societies that have been given the opportunity to start a new government, just like the animals on Animal Farm. They are upset about, in chapter 1, and you see this in chapter 1, they are upset about their mistreatment, and they are coming to realize that they deserve better. In chapter 2, they are pushed over the edge, and they stage not an unorganized, but it just kind of happened organically. They stage a revolution and they overthrow their oppressor. And in chapter 3, and they also have the commandments that were given to them in chapter 1 by Old Major. They turn them into, on the barn, they go ahead and they paint it. They turn it into the commandments of animalism, okay? And again, which is supposed to mirror the rules that govern a society. their society, but again, it parallels our own. And so they go ahead and they write down the rules of animalism, the commandments of animalism. And then in chapter 3, you see them living by that, or at least appearing to live by that, because you already know the pigs are, some of the pigs are engaging in some shady behavior, like what happened to the milk? Where did it go? So again, you're putting yourself in the position of the founders of the Declaration of Independence, or those that have created a society from scratch, or those, again, like the animals in Animal Farm. So as you guys are thinking that you are, and those of you that like, dystopian literature, that like kind of the books and the movies, kind of like Hunger Games and Divergent, where it's about a dystopian society, and they have to stage a revolution against their oppressor, and they have to start again as we the people, all that. So think about that. If you were in that position, whichever position it is that you've chosen at this point, if you were in that position, then what kind of government would you want to create? What would the rules in your government look like? So I want you guys on this sheet of paper, you're going to go ahead and you're going to title it right here, Creating a New Society, okay? On the sheet of paper, you're going to go ahead and you're going to write down as many rules as you can think of, as long as, again, you are centering yourself on the idea that the purpose is to slowly create a new society. This doesn't happen overnight. It involves people having to agree and say yes, and you want to make sure that you are creating rules that are for all of the constituents, for all of the members of society. Sorry, constituents as if it was like a voting block. Once you're done brainstorming and you're writing it down, okay, then I want you guys to go ahead and to rank them, okay, because the first time that you write it down is kind of like free-flowing, you're writing down the ones that come to mind. You might even like be doing your own research. What are some of the rules that our country has versus other countries, etc., etc. So, and again, you guys can think about things, and I wrote some down for you. But, a rule in society can be something like treat each other equally. Give and take advantage of opportunities presented to you. Go to school and do your work to pass your classes and to graduate. These can be like rules, right, in my world. Don't litter or pollute. Everyone must have health care provided to them. Pay everyone equally. Be honest and transparent. You are innocent until proven guilty. Do not harm or kill. Do not give too much power to one person or organization or party. Now, I went ahead and a few years ago when I taught Animal Farm for the last time, I was doing this activity with my students at the time, and I took a picture of one of their works in progress. You know how I do, like when we do something in class and it's from scratch, and I go ahead and I take a picture and then I erase it and I do it all over again for another class. So I did that a few years ago, and I was thinking about writing down some of the rules and stuff that all the classes had come up with and that they had agreed on, and those were some of the ones. They went ahead and they ranked them in order of importance, okay, just like you're doing. You're going to rank your brainstorm of rules in order of importance. Number 1 at the top being the highest, and number 10 being the lowest, but still important enough to have made the cut, right? I mean, like out of all the rules that you have available to you, these are the ones that made it. So, when you're done, you're then going to convert them into human rights. And I know that's not, that's something that we've talked about throughout the year, but not something that we've really dived into. That's more for like my multicultural class. I mean, the name of the class is literally Multicultural Racial Literacy and Human Rights. I mean, this is what we do. So, human rights are essentially rights that all people, regardless of class, race, religion, nationality, documentation status, sexuality, gender, political affiliation, ideology, language, etc. Things that we started talking about at the beginning of the school year and kind of continued as a theme throughout the year. these are the rights that they deserve and therefore are privy to. It is something that they didn't have to earn, that they didn't have to work for. It is something that by virtue of being born, you have these unalienable rights. You hear that illusion? You have these unalienable rights by virtue of being a human being. And so you can look at, if you need like a little bit of help after you're done ranking your rules in order, you can go over to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You guys have heard me mention this seminal document several times. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was created by an international body of joint countries after the Holocaust, after World War II, because in a span of 30 years, the country had endured World War I, World War II, and a never-before-seen mass genocide on a multi-country scale, like the Holocaust. And so you can definitely see if any of the rules that you guys wrote down as a society, that you believe that a society should follow, do you see them like translating into a human right? So, for example, in the rule that my students years ago created, they said a rule should be treat everyone equally. When they translated that, converted that into a human right, it's that you have the right to be free from discrimination, right? You have the right to be free from intolerance and discrimination. And that came from the rule of you should treat everyone equally. Okay, to give you another example, go to school, do your work, pass, and graduate. Well, when they converted that as a rule, when they converted that into a right, then it was you have the right to an unbiased, truthful, quality education. And that's something that they felt very, very deeply about, based on like their own experiences and stuff. Another example, everyone must have health care. So when converted into a human right, it was you have the right to affordable, accessible, and quality health care. Excuse me. I'm just used to quality education. Another one. Pay everyone equally was the rule. When you transfer that, when you convert that into a right, it was you have the right to labor equity. We'll get into that word in a moment. You have the right to labor equity and fair pay regardless of your position. Okay? So it was essentially, and what they meant by that was that regardless of your identity and regardless of the background that you have, that you should be paid accordingly. There should not be a man that makes more money than a woman. There shouldn't be a white person that makes more money than a black person, that makes more money than a Latinx person, so on and so forth. You are innocent until proven guilty was one of their rights. When they converted that, it was you have a right to a speedy, fair, and equitable legal system to discipline equally among all. Do not harm or kill was a rule. When they converted that into a right, into a human right, it was you have the right to be free from harm. You have the right to safety and security. You have the right to life. So think about when you have like your brainstorm of rules, okay, that you believe that your society should have, and that the people in which you are in community with should follow. Go ahead and put that in ranked order. Most important 1, least important 10. And then when you're done, convert those rules that you would want people in your community to follow, convert them into human rights that all people are deserving of, all people are privy to, have access to, regardless of identity and by virtue of being born as a human being. Okay? Your chart can look a little bit like this. Again, these are your rules in a new society. No particular order, just what you were spitballing, what you were brainstorming. Then you can put it, then you rank it, and then you convert it into human rights. Like I said here, just, an FYI, leave a fourth column here because we're going to be using it in the future if you want. If not, you can just kind of keep working on the same sheet of paper for a different activity. Now, what I'm hoping that you guys understand by the end of this, by the end of that activity, is that just because something is a rule in society doesn't, like in our society, right? In our society, just because something is a rule does not mean that it's a human right. In the same way, just because something is a rule in society doesn't mean that it doesn't violate human rights. There are rules that we have in society that absolutely do violate human rights. The fact that a 3 strikes law that was passed by President Bill Clinton back in the 90s, a 3 strikes law where he said that if you are engaging in a third felony, and there are ridiculous things that are considered a felony, that if this is your third felony, that you will be imprisoned for life. For life. You guys think that it's hard being in your home for a few weeks? Try being in a cell for life. And not only that, but think about solitary confinement. When the World Health Organization, when Amnesty International, when the United Nations, they have all declared solitary confinement as an act of torture. And yet, the United States still engages in solitary confinement, and in solitary confinement of young people, in solitary confinement of teenagers, which is psychologically scarring. That's for life. That psychological scar, that's for life. Debilitating. And so, there are things, and we've talked about this before, legality does not equal morality. Just because something is legal in society doesn't mean that it is moral. And just because something is moral in society doesn't mean that society has recognized it as legal. So the same concept here. We're just throwing in a new idea. We're throwing in what we've talked about all year, but now we're naming it. We're throwing in human rights. Just because something is a rule in society, just because something is legal in society, doesn't mean that it is a human right. In the same way that just because something is illegal in society doesn't mean that it isn't a human right. Just because something is a rule in society doesn't mean that it doesn't violate and it doesn't hurt and it doesn't go against human rights. So I want you guys to think about, just because something is a right, is a human right, doesn't mean that it actually shows up as a rule in society. We have things. I highly encourage you during this activity to look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's a beautiful document. A beautiful document the United States has yet to ratify. It's a beautiful document. And I want you to ask yourself, do we actually have these laws in society that mirror the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Or are there things in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that are not in our laws? What would your society look like? Would your society mirror a place where human rights are followed, where human rights are acknowledged, where human rights are lived up to? I hope so, but this is, definitely your activity. Now, there are a few concepts that I want to go over with you: equality, equity, liberation. So there's a difference between equality, which you all know equality, but there's a difference between equality and equity. Equity and equality are two different strategies that we can use in an effort to produce fairness, and I'm hoping that the kind of society that you are building is a fair one. Equality is treating everyone the same, okay? Equity is giving everyone what they need to be successful. There's a difference, because you would think that if you treat everyone the same, then they're all going to be equally successful. You've treated them equally. But what if there's someone who needs more than someone else? If you treat all of them equally, that person is going to be equally behind. That person is going to be equally disadvantaged. It's proportional. And so equality aims to produce, equality aims to produce fairness, but it can only work if everyone starts at the same starting line. And if everyone needs the same kind of help. Equality is about sameness. Equity is about acknowledging the differences and making up for those differences. Okay, so I highly encourage you guys to look at this little picture right here. They are all being treated equally, right? They all have gotten the same size box. However, they are not at the same starting position. This person is significantly taller, this person is moderate, and this person is very short. And so giving all of them the same size box just allows this person to proportionately see more, allows this person to proportionally see a little more, and allows this person to proportionally not see anything. Because the treatment is the same. And so the sameness is still there, but that's equality. Equity is giving everyone what they need in order to be successful. This person did not need a box. This person did need a box, and this person needed 2 boxes. If you notice, the treatment is the same, but the starting line isn't. The starting line is not the same. Here, the treatment is not the same, but it is equitable, because now the starting line is the same. Now they are all equally capable of seeing the game. Now they can all equally see the game. And I want to just reverse my statement for a moment, okay? They are not equally capable of seeing the game, and so they require different treatment. But now they can all equally see the game, okay? Equity in treatment has allowed them to equally see the game. Equality in treatment does not make up for the differences of their lived experiences, okay? Next one. So equality is about sameness. Equality, it promotes fairness and justice by giving everyone the same thing, but it can only work if everyone starts from the same place. In this example, equality only works if everyone is the same height. Equity is about fairness. It's about making sure people get access to the same opportunities. Sometimes our differences and or systemic history can create barriers to participation. So we must first ensure that equity is there before we can enjoy the equality. And then the reality is that there's a lot of unfairness. Reality is that there is no room for equality and equity. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. There's more work on this person to try to get ahead. And there's less work, but still work on this person to try to get ahead. And there's no work on behalf of this person to stay ahead. And so we should really be thinking about, and it's just a different depiction, we should really be thinking about the reality of the situation. If the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and in what ways? I mean, right now, throughout the country, you are seeing in Miami and Florida, the data is not out yet. The racial gap data regarding the coronavirus is not out yet. But in Detroit, throughout all of Michigan, which is where Detroit is, you have approximately 60% of people who have contracted the coronavirus. And when I say 60%, I mean 66% of people who have contracted the coronavirus are Black, are African American, in a state that is predominantly white. In Chicago, 70% of people that have contracted the coronavirus are Black and or African American. The data is not out yet in Miami or in Florida. Okay, in New York, you have approximately 60 to 70% of people who have contracted the coronavirus, Black and or Latino. And so what you're seeing is that there's an overwhelming right here, okay? Right here. Even though the treatment for the coronavirus has, for the most part, been the same. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I just read a lot. Even though the treatment has, for the most part, been the same, and they're still experimenting, they're still trying to keep people's fevers down, they're trying to keep people on respirators, on ventilators, because this is a respiratory illness. What you're seeing is that the gap between people's income, the gap between people's access to quality health care, the gap between where people live, a lot of people of color, a lot of Latinx and Black families living in areas that are highly populated, densely populated, that are stacked, meaning that it's a lot of people that live in close quarters and are multi-generational. So you have grandparents, parents, and children typically living all in the same household. And what you're seeing is that allows for community spread to happen more. And so you might be giving everyone, and I'm going to make this statement lightly, you might be giving everyone the same treatment of medical treatment, but they're coming in with disproportionate levels of health. They're coming in with disproportionate levels of income that has either allowed them to treat their symptoms before coming to the hospital better, or not treat it, or not be able to afford to treat it with medicines, not able to practice social distancing because of how many people live in a home, in a residence. There are a lot of systemic barriers that have shown the racial disparities in this country through a virus. And so that's the reality. What the goal should be is really liberation. The goal should really essentially be to get rid of the systemic barrier. This is the systemic barrier. Get rid of the systemic barrier and allow people to equally and equitably participate in opportunities and contribute to society. And so, in the first image, it is assumed that everyone will benefit from the same supports. They are being treated equally under that assumption. In the second image, individuals are given different supports to make it possible for them to have equal access to the game. They're being treated equitably. But here, in the third image, all three can see the game without any supports or accommodations because the cause of the inequity, the cause of the inequality was addressed. This is about removing systemic barriers. This is about removing institutional discrimination and institutional racism, sexism, classism that perpetuates these inequalities over generations and over time. And so we're going to go ahead, we're going to start reading Animal Farm. Let me check on the time. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to start reading Animal Farm today. You can, like always, you don't have to order the book. I'm also incredibly sure that it is free on your Audible. I'm just saying, even though I'm working here like an Audible for you, but I'm sure that it's also on Audible because it's considered a classic. You can get it for free. But also, if you just Google Animal Farm PDF, or you click here for one, or you use the one that I provided for you under the text folder in Schoology, then you can go ahead and you can read any of the chapters that way. Now, the questions are pretty simple because, like I said, it is really about the critical thinking process of the concept of rules in society, rights in society, and also the concept of fairness. And then we're moving on to the functions that are necessary to create a successful society. We'll be doing that after the reading. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's jump into this reading. Animal Farm by George Orwell. Did that move? That didn't move, right? I have a bird feeder and I'm so distracted by it. Okay, chapter 3. So, we left off, just as a recap, we left off with the animals engaging in the overthrow of Mr. Jones and his farmhands at Manor Farm. They renamed it Animal Farm. They put up the 7 commandments of animalism. They painted it on there, and the cows had to be milked because they couldn't hold the milk in anymore. Napoleon says that he will take care of the milk. Snowball invites everyone, and just a reminder that Snowball is representative of Trotsky in the Russian Revolution, and Napoleon is representative of Stalin in the Russian Revolution, who turns into a dictator. Okay, so Snowball invites people to come out into the fields with him and to have the best harvest ever. A better harvest than one that could have been produced by man, because now they are invested in it. Now they're going to own the profit. Now they're going to reap what they sow. Now they're going to enjoy the fruits of their labor, very literally and figuratively. And so come, join me out in the harvest. And then Napoleon tells them, you go out there, I will take care of this, meaning the milk. And when they come back, the milk has disappeared, no one knows where it went. And so that's how chapter 2 ends. Chapter 3, we'll go ahead and we'll begin. How they toiled and sweated to get the hay in, but their efforts were rewarded, for the harvest was an even bigger success than they had hoped. Sometimes the work was hard. The implements had been designed for human beings and not for animals, and it was a great drawback that no animal was able to use any tool that involved standing on his hind legs. But the pigs were so clever that they could think of a way round every difficulty. As for the horses, they knew every inch of the field, and in fact understood the business of mowing and raking far better than Jones and his men had ever done. The pigs did not actually work, but directed and supervised the others. With their superior knowledge, it was natural that they should assume the leadership. My only commentary here is that at what point was there any say regarding who was going to be a leader? I thought that all animals in Animal Farm, wasn't that one of the commandments? That all animals shall be treated equally? Am I wrong? I mean, I thought that the whole point of Animal Farm was so that every animal could have a say, so that they would no longer be ruled by someone else. I'm not saying that it violated the last rule yet, or the second to last rule, I believe it was, about no animal shall ever tyrannize another animal. I'm not saying it's gotten there yet, but where did this leadership come from? It was natural, because the pigs were superior beings, more intelligent. It was natural that they were to assume the positions of leadership. But where's the vote in that? Where do all animals have a chance to be heard and to have a say if the pigs naturally are the leaders? So, just something to think about. Like, it just already seems to be getting off to a funky kind of start, right? So, Boxer and Clover would harness themselves to the cutter or the horse rake. No bits or reins were needed in these days, of course, and tramped steadily round and round the field, with a pig walking behind and calling out, "Gee up, comrade," or "Whoa, back, comrade," as the case might be. And every animal, down to the humblest, worked at turning the hay and gathering it. Even the ducks and hens toiled to and fro all day in the sun, carrying tiny wisps of hay in their beaks. In the end, they finished the harvest in 2 days less time than it had usually taken Jones and his men. Moreover, it was the biggest harvest that the farm had ever seen. There was no wastage whatsoever. The hens and ducks with their sharp eyes had gathered up the very last stock, and not an animal on the farm had stolen so much as a mouthful. All through the summer, the work of the farm went like clockwork. The animals were very happy as they had never conceived it possible to be. Every mouthful of food was an acute positive pleasure. Now that it was truly their own food, produced by themselves and for themselves, not doled out to them by a grudging master. With the worthless, parasitical human beings gone, there was more for everyone to eat. And again, the human beings are representative of an oppressive government. When the working people work for themselves and not to keep the elite rich, not to make the rich richer off of their labor, off of their work, then they can actually enjoy a bigger piece of the pie of what the profits are in society, because it goes to them too, not to their managers. I mean, it's just, there's so much here for you guys to extract meaning from. I'm going to read that again. With the worthless, parasitical human beings gone, there was more for everyone to eat. There was more leisure, too, inexperienced though the animals were. They met with many difficulties. For instance, later in the year, when they harvested the corn, they had to tread it out in the ancient style and blow away the chaff with their breath, since the farm possessed no threshing machine. But the pigs, with their cleverness, and Botzer, with his tremendous muscles, always pulled them through. Botzer was the admiration of everybody. He had been a hard worker even in Jones's time, but now he seemed more like 3 horses than 1. There were days when the entire work of the farm seemed to rest on his mighty shoulders. Again, Botzer is the working class. Botzer represents the working class people. From morning to night, he was pushing and pulling, always at the spot where the work was hardest. He had made an arrangement with one of the cockerels to call him in the mornings half an hour earlier than anyone else, and would put in some volunteer labor at whatever seemed to be most needed before the regular day's work began. His answer to every problem, every setback was, "I will work harder," which he had adopted as his personal motto. But everyone worked according to his capacity. The hens and ducks, for instance, gave 5 bushels of corn at the harvest by gathering up the stray gains. Nobody stole. Please remember that in this kind of society, when you steal for yourself, you're stealing from everybody else, because it's all of your work together that created this. Nobody stole. Nobody grumbled over his rations. The quarreling and biting and jealousy, which had been normal features of life in the old days, had almost disappeared. Nobody shirked, or almost nobody. Molly, remember that Molly represents the bourgeois. Molly, the elite, the upper class. Molly, it was true, was not good at getting up in the mornings, and had a way of leaving work early on the ground that there was a stone in her hoof, and the behavior of the cat was somewhat peculiar. It was soon noticed that when there was work to be done, the cat could never be found. She would vanish for hours on end and then reappear at meal times, or in the evening after work was over, as though nothing had happened. But she always made such excellent excuses and purred so affectionately that it was impossible not to believe in her good intentions. Old Benjamin the donkey, now remember that old Benjamin? The donkey, he's a skeptic. He is cynical. He's not very optimistic in any kind of government, in any kind of leadership, whether it was under Jones or now under the pigs. He just believes that, you know what, we're going to be ruled over by someone anyway. So whether it's Jones or these people or these pigs or us, supposedly, I don't see any difference in the amount of work that we are doing. Don't see it. So he's very skeptical. Here we are. Old Benjamin, the donkey, seemed quite unchanged since the rebellion. He did his work in the same slow, obstinate way as he had done it in Joan's time, never shirking and never volunteering for extra hours, for extra work either. About the rebellion and its results, he would express no opinion. When asked whether or not he was happier now that Jones was gone, he would say only, "Donkeys live a long time. None of you has ever seen a dead donkey," and the others had to be content with this cryptic answer. On Sundays there was no work. Breakfast was an hour later than usual, and after breakfast there was a ceremony which was observed every week without fail. First came the hoisting of the flag. Snowball had found in the harness room an old green tablecloth of Mrs. Jones and had painted on it a hoof and a horn in white. This was run up the flagstaff in the farmhouse garden every Sunday morning. The flag was green, Snowball explained, to represent the green fields of England, while the hoof and horn signified the future republic of the animals which would arise when the human race had finally been overthrown. After the hoisting of the flag, all the animals trooped into the big barn for a general assembly, which was known as the meeting. Here, the work of the coming week was planned out, and resolutions were put forward and debated. It was always the pigs who put forward the resolutions. The other animals understood how to vote, but could never think of any resolutions of their own. Snowball and Napoleon were by far the most active in the debates, but it was noticed that these two were never in agreement. Whatever suggestion either of them made, the other could be counted on to oppose it. Even when it was resolved, a thing no one could object to in itself, to set aside the small paddock behind the orchard as a home of rest for animals who were past work, there was a stormy debate over the correct retiring age for each class of animal. The meeting always ended with the singing of the Beasts of England, and the afternoon was given up to recreation. The pigs had set aside the harness room as a headquarters for themselves. Here, in the evenings, they studied blacksmithing, carpentering, and other necessary arts from books which they had brought out of the farmhouse. Snowball also busied himself with organizing the animals into what he called animal committees. He was indefatigable at this, meaning that he never got tired. Look at the root word right here, fatigue. So for you to be able to be fatigued, but this right here, indi, means that he was not able to get fatigued. He worked tirelessly. He formed the egg production committee for the hens, the Clean Tails League for the cows, the Wild Comrades Re-Education Committee. The object of the Re-Education Committee was to tame the rats and rabbits. Remember that the rats and the rabbits, the wild creatures, were the ones that were considered the outsiders of society, the ones that were marginalized, the ones that were not necessarily part of any one society because they were born elsewhere, they belonged elsewhere, they lived elsewhere. And so remember that in chapter 1, under Old Major, who represented Lenin, they had voted upon the rats and the wild creatures, like the rabbits, to be considered an animal, a friend. And so the re-education process was about getting them to become educated in animalism and getting them to become part of their society and, a state of inclusivity. The whiter wool movement for the sheep and various others besides instituting classes in reading and writing. On the whole, these projects were a failure. The attempt to tame wild creatures, for instance, broke down almost immediately. They continued to behave very much as before, and when treated with generosity, simply took advantage of it. The cat joined the re-education committee and was very active in it for some days. She was seen one day sitting on a roof and talking to some sparrows who were just out of her reach. She was telling them that all animals were now comrades and that any sparrow who chose could come and perch on her paw. But the sparrows kept their distance, so it looks here like the cat was just trying to line up another meal, which again is against animalism, because I think that the very last commandment was, thou shalt not kill any other animal. The reading and writing classes, however, were a great success. By autumn, almost every animal on the farm was literate in some degree. As for the pigs, they could already read and write perfectly. The dogs learned to read fairly well, but were not interested in reading anything except the 7 commandments. So again, think about the dog, like what the dogs represent. The dogs representing like security, and the dogs representing like a policing almost. Like think about watchdogs. Think about the shepherding that dogs do to gather up a society, to gather up the sheep, right? To gather up the goats, to gather up the cattle, things like that. So the dogs learned to read fairly well, but were not interested in reading anything except the 7 commandments. So really no need to like broaden your education there, no need for like growth, just, the laws. And again, when you realize that, you see the dogs being a kind of law enforcement, okay? There's no growth, there's just the law. Muriel the goat could read somewhat better than the dogs, and sometimes used to read to the others in the evenings from scraps of newspaper which he found on the rubbish heap. Benjamin could read as well as any pig, but never exercised his faculty. So far as he knew, he said, there was nothing worth reading. Again, that's skepticism. Clover learned the whole alphabet, but could not put words together. Remember that Clover is more clever. Clover is more clever than Boxer, the 2 workhorses. But they're not the smartest of the animals. And again, I'm not saying that about the working class in general, because the level of labor is also a sign of the level of opportunities and the level of access to education and the level of access to advantages, the level of access to opportunities that were given, right? So this is very telling of like working class populations throughout the world. So where not a lot of opportunities are given. Clover learned the whole alphabet, but could not put words together. Boxer could not get beyond the letter D. He would trace out A, B, C, D in the dust with his great hoof, and then he would stand staring at the letters with his ears back, sometimes shaking his forelock, trying with all his might to remember what came next and never succeeding. On several occasions, indeed, he did learn E, F, G, H, but by the time that he knew them, it was always discovered that he had forgotten A, B, C, and D. Finally, he decided to be content with the first 4 letters and used to write them out once or twice every day to refresh his memory. Molly refused to learn any but the 6 letters which spelled her own name. And again, this is an effort of the lack of growth, a reflection of the lack of growth, of the lack of interest. Even when opportunities have been afforded, the lack of like wanting to use those opportunities in order to help others around you. Molly refused to learn any but the 6 letters which spelled her own name. She would form these very neatly out of pieces of twig, and then would decorate them with flowers or 2 and walk around them, admiring them. None of the other animals on the farm could get any further than the letter A. It was also found that the stupider animals, such as the sheep, the hens, and the ducks, were unable to learn the 7 commandments by heart. After much thought, Snowball declared that the 7 commandments could in effect be reduced to a single maxim, namely, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. So think about what this means. If they didn't have the ability to read for themselves, to write, then that hinders their level of expression, but it also hinders their lack of understanding. They're not able to read, and therefore they're not able to discern different pieces of information for themselves. They depend on the pigs and those who are more intelligent in order to tell them what to believe. And that therefore makes them very susceptible, very vulnerable to manipulation, very vulnerable to indoctrination, Remember that indoctrination is when the society around you and the education system around you drills, or the religion around you drills into you what to believe, without question, without alternative, without challenge. Okay? And so, if the animals couldn't read for themselves, it means that they couldn't learn for themselves, and they couldn't find anything that challenged what others around them were saying. They had to depend on those animals higher up to tell them what to believe, to tell them what to do, and that makes them more vulnerable to exploitation. Okay? The fact that they didn't even know their own laws, their own 7 commandments, their own rules of animalism, means that they don't know what all the animals had to live by. All the animals had to live by these 7 commandments, but they didn't know the 7 commandments. And so if you don't know what the rules are, how do you know what your rights are? How do you know if someone else is breaking a rule or violating a right, a commandment right in front of you? If you don't even know what the commandment is, if you don't even know what the rule or the right is, right? How do you know that it isn't being violated in front of you? How do you know that you're not violating it yourself? How do you know that you're not being framed and told that you're violating something when you really aren't? It really makes your inability to receive proper education, your inability to fully understand, makes you more vulnerable to exploitation by others. Okay? And I feel like there was another point. I'm explaining all this so that you can understand, so kind of to foreshadow what's going to happen with the leadership. The animals are being told what to believe because they can't read or understand for themselves. And because they can't read or understand for themselves, and it all just kind of comes down to 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, then you can look at the pigs and be like, 4 legs, good. We believe what they tell us to believe. We do what they tell us to do. And we don't know if they're breaking any rules. We don't know if when they tell us about the rules, if those are actually the rules, and we can't read them for ourselves. Alright, so this, he said, contained the essential principle of animalism. Whoever had thoroughly grasped it, it would be safe from human influences. The birds at first objected, since it seemed that they also had 2 legs, but Snowball proved to them that this was not so. A bird's wings, comrade, he said, is an organ of propulsion and not of manipulation. It should therefore be regarded as a leg. The distinguishing mark of man is the hand, the instrument with which he does all his mischief. Whew. The birds did not understand Snowball's long words, but they accepted his explanation, and all the humbler animals set to work to learn the new maxim by heart. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, was inscribed on the end wall of the barn above the 7 commandments and in bigger letters. When they had once got it by heart, the sheep developed a great liking for this maxim, and often as they lay in the field, they would all start bleating, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, and kept it up for hours on end, never growing tired of it. Remember that the sheep are what we call in society of human beings who just follow unquestionably and without thinking and without challenging, again, without thinking. We call people sheep. And so the sheep here are displaying the very characteristic, stereotypical behaviors of people who are called sheep. Napoleon took no interest in Snowball's committees. He said that the education of the young was more important than anything that could be done for those who were already grown up. It happened that Jessie and Bluebell, the 2 dogs, had both whelped soon after the hay harvest, giving birth between them to 9 sturdy puppies. As soon as they were weaned, Napoleon, meaning they had had enough milk and they could be taken away from their mothers, as soon as they were weaned, Napoleon took them away from their mothers, saying that he would make himself responsible for their education. He took them up into a loft, which could be only reached by a ladder from the harness room, and there kept them in such seclusion that the rest of the farm soon forgot their existence. So think about this for a moment. Napoleon took such an interest in these 9 puppies, keeping in mind what the dogs symbolically represent as law enforcement, okay? As the ones who guard the borders, as the one who protect the area, as the one who can round up the other animals, okay? So he takes these 9 puppies away from their mother, and so rather than getting a nurturing kind of environment, it's said that it is because he is so intent on investing in their education. But there's no challenge or question as to what they're being educated in, right? You just trust the leadership to educate your young, okay? And then they're kept in a place where the animals can't get to because they don't have hands and feet to climb up. The mystery of the mystery of where the milk went to was soon cleared up. It was mixed every day into the pig's mash. The early apples were now ripening, and the grass of the orchard was littered with windfalls. The animals had assumed as a matter of course that these would be shared out equally. One day, however, the order went forth that all the windfalls were to be collected and brought to the harness room for the use of the pigs. At this, some of the other animals murmured, but it was no use. All the pigs were in full agreement on this point, even Snowball and Napoleon. Squealer, remember that Squealer represents propaganda, okay? And so you're seeing that Snowball, even though you understand that Napoleon is symbolic of Joseph Stalin and the dictatorship and the totalitarian regime that Russia becomes after Tsar Nicholas II, you come to see how this animal farm is slowly turning into, so you go from a monarchy to a twisted communism, right? You now see how the animals that are ruling over without vote, without democracy, without all animals having a say, you now see that these leaders of Animal Farm are now taking extra privileges unto themselves without any inclusion of the voices of other animals. And even when they do speak up, not that they, really do, but even when they do speak up, now you have the little propaganda pig, Squealer, who is sent to make the necessary explanations. This is what the party line is. This is why we're doing what we're doing and going out there to convince and confuse and do the runaround around the animals. Comrades, he cried, you do not imagine, I hope, that we pigs are doing this in a spirit of selfishness and privilege. Many of us actually dislike milk and apples. I dislike them myself. Our sole object in taking these things is to preserve our health. Milk and apples, this has been proven by science, comrades, contain substances absolutely necessary to the well-being of a pig. We pigs are brain workers. The whole management and organization of this farm depends on us. Day and night we are watching over your welfare. It is for your sake that we drink that milk and eat those apples. Do you know what would happen if we pigs failed in our duty? Jones would come back. Yes, Jones would come back. Surely, comrades, cried Squealer almost pleadingly, skipping from side to side and whistling his tail. Surely there is no one among you who wants to see Jones come back. And so now you begin to see the mixture of propaganda elicited by fear. You now have lies being told. You have facts being twisted. You have the supposed authority of science. Where's the science here? But you have this supposed proposition of authority via science that is given to the animals here. And then you throw in a fear that if the animals don't accept this, then things will go back to the way that things were under Mr. Jones, under your previous oppressor. So you're seeing the pigs, you're seeing the oppressed become the oppressor once more. Now, if there was one thing the animals were completely certain of, So they didn't know all that Squealer was saying, and they were having a hard time with it. But if there was one thing that they were completely certain of, it was that they did not want Jones back. When it was put to them in this light, they had no more to say. The importance of keeping the pigs in good health was all too obvious. So it was agreed without further argument that the milk and the windfall apples, and also the main crop of apples when they ripen. So not just the apples that fell off the tree naturally, but even the ones that would be plucked should be reserved for the pigs alone. So for the post-chapter 3 analysis, I'm going to go ahead and read off some of the notes that I put together and emailed to myself. So I don't want to recap the entire chapter. I just wanted to highlight like a few parts. The part where Boxer is just, saying, I will work harder over and over again, just repeating that little motto that he kind of assigned to himself. The part that Boxer continues to just work without question and work harder and believe that every task should befall upon him in order for him to carry on his shoulders and bear the brunt of the work, and that he should give maximum effort. There's a kind of blind faith to this that is really troubling, because that blind faith is the key to continuing to allow for the exploitation of your labor to occur. You're also seeing that this is the working class people conforming to like a political system that does not necessarily always show that it has the best interest of the working class people in mind. Now, when we go over to the literacy of the animals, and you see this so unfortunately in the working class with Boxer and with Clover. When you go over to see the varying degrees of literacy that these animals have, you're really seeing a control of information. Because if the animals themselves cannot read, cannot write, or even less write, if the animals cannot read and receive information for themselves and depend on others to give them information, then it allows for an imbalance of power. Now, to the pigs' credit, they do try to teach the animals at one point how to read, but there's either an unwillingness or an incapability to be able to do so. And so now you see the pigs becoming kind of like not only the leaders of the society, but the guardians, really, of animalism. You're seeing them become like the gatekeepers to what the commandments of animalism are and to what the guiding principles of animal farm should be. And this becomes dangerous because you're consolidating, you're kind of pooling together your power in a super concentrated area and not sharing that power equally or equitably among other animals. And so you're seeing the 7 commandments have like a mix of things. It has anti-human rhetoric in it by saying no animals shall wear clothing, shall engage in trade, shall have money. And then you also see like these moral commandments. For example, no animal shall kill other animals. And then you have like these utopian, idealistic kind of commandments where it says that all animals are equal. Now, they reduce all of this down to one slogan because, again, of the unwillingness or of the incapability of animals to be able to read, to be able to memorize the commandments, and they reduce it down to 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. Now, this slogan becomes a rallying cry. It becomes a propaganda tool that the pigs, particularly Squealer, as this is his job, take advantage of, because it reduces all of the different elements of the 7 commandments, the anti-human elements, the moral elements, the utopian idealistic elements, and it kind of like erases all that for the indoctrination of this one motto, for the memorizing and for the rallying around this one motto. And so it's undergone such the 7 commandments tenets of animalism have undergone such a broad generalization. Anything with 4 legs, good, or wings, or whatever, good. Anything on 2 legs, bad. It has completely erased the anti-human, the moral, and the utopian elements that are ingrained in the 7 commandments, that it doesn't allow the animals to really question any kind of unhappiness that they might be experiencing, and it just focuses on the pig's rhetoric that this is all good because of our limbs. Now, because the animals can't think critically about the slogan, it makes them believe that the animals are galvanizing each other and around themselves in a sort of freedom, but actually it's just the pigs who are instituting their own oppressive regime. The animals are partially responsible for this power imbalance because, again, they show little initiative in wanting to learn or in learning to read. The dogs have no interest in anything except for the 7 commandments. Boxer and Clover can only learn, up to a certain point. Molly has no interest in anything outside of herself. Benjamin doesn't participate, doesn't contribute, even though he understands, but he doesn't want to push his skills. However, the varying degrees of literacy and the varying degrees of cooperation or contribution or participation should not lead you to believe that it is the working people's fault for the oppression that is to come next. Again, you have to understand that it's not the fault of the common animals for their failure to be able to learn, or for their inability to push themselves, for their inability to see the value in this. It also does not, and I want to be super clear about this, it also does not excuse the behavior of the pigs. Because if the pigs were true leaders, then they would understand that it is their life's work, and it is their duty to protect the more humble, the less intelligent, the less capable animals that are under them, because all animals should be equal, but you already saw like a hierarchy being established. And so if the pigs were truly noble, then they would consider it their duty to serve these animals whose labor serves them. It is my duty to protect those underneath me. Instead, they exploit the lack of intelligence. They exploit the fact that they can't read or write. They exploit the lack of critical thinking. And they use that exploitation in order to further their own privilege, in order to disguise their actions as one that are worthy, when it's really about their own gain. So I wanted to make sure that I point that out. The pigs mix, where the other animals lack intelligence and the pigs have all this intelligence, they're also being manipulative, they're being deceitful, they're being opportunistic. And so again, is it entirely the fault of the working class? Is it entirely the fault of the humbler and less intelligent and less educated of the animals for how far they've come? No. It also doesn't excuse the pigs exploiting them and exploiting their labor. So Squealer goes in and he begins to give them all of this deceitful propaganda, instilling fear in there. You see him mixing his use of rhetoric with the psychological trauma that that all the animals had under Jones, and then the animals kind of feel like they have no other choice but to listen to the pigs. And overall, you can kind of see this as Orwell, who himself is a socialist and who believes in the ideals that were put forth by the Russian Revolution in the beginning, but he's also criticizing. I mean, like chapter 2, the animals had just overthrown their oppressor. They had just overthrown their tyrant that was making their lives miserable and taking all of their profit, all of the produce of their labor, the fruit of their labor, for his own gain, for his own profit, for his own exploitation, or in his own exploitation, for his own luxury. Excuse me. And then chapter 2 ends, and at the end of chapter 2, you're already seeing some deceitful, shady behavior, but on behalf of Napoleon. And by the time that we get to chapter 3, the rhetoric of animalism is already washed out. And you already are seeing the pigs taking control, lobbying for control. It comes down to Napoleon and to Snowball, and Squealers around there kind of spinning all the lies and everything. And confusing the animals and instilling fear. And so this is really, in the opinion of Orwell, you're seeing him critique regimes that, and I can't help but think of other countries, but you see Orwell critiquing regimes that overthrow oppressive governments and that are supposed to start anew and put the power in the hands of the people and be equal and equitable in their power distribution. And you already see a power imbalance. And you already see exploitative rhetoric. And you already see the hierarchies being established. And it's kind of a critique of Orwell that the Russian Revolution, after the revolution itself, very quickly just becomes a propaganda, and very quickly the rhetoric becomes a way to control the people. Very quickly, their ideals become meaningless, and the intelligentsia, which the pigs represent, the intelligentsia become those that control over the minds and the work of the people, and are supposed to, and it's supposed to all be for the good of the people, for the good of the state. It was said, but really, anyone who opposed or who challenged what was happening was seen as an enemy of the people. We see this happening, and not just Russia, we see this happening throughout many countries, including our own, where anyone who challenges government, anyone who challenges seats of power, anyone who challenges the decisions of those in power is seen as an enemy of the state, as an enemy of the people. And so that's just something for you to keep in mind, because we're seeing, it's a historical trend. We're seeing it now in the way that our media is being attacked. We're seeing it now in the way that smaller governments and that governors that don't bow down to national rhetoric are being attacked. And so you can definitely see this book not only being a parallel to the Russian Revolution, but also being a criticism of any governments that have tyrannical, authoritarian, totalitarian trends hidden in it. And that's something for you guys to look out for in the news, and something for you guys to think about as you go through chapter 3. Okay. Other than that, please remember that your work is going to be due on Friday, since it is only one chapter. And after you guys are done, there are a few discussion questions here for you. On the same sheet of paper, imagine you were in the same situation as the animals. Remember that chapter 1 was about miserable conditions where the animals realize, where the animals believe that they deserve more. There has to be more to this. Chapter 2, the revolution, the overthrowing of the oppressor. And chapter 3, the hard work of the animals under a new regime, but their work and their minds are already being exploited and manipulated. I want you guys to write 5 rules. This is separate from the work that you had already done, but on the same sheet of paper, keeping in mind what you just learned about equality and equity, the reality of those things, fairness, the goal of liberation. Think about the rules or the laws that you would want everyone to follow. Write those 5 to 10 rules that you would want to structure a society that you will be slowly creating. Okay? On the same sheet of paper, according to chapter 2 to 3, these are your discussion questions. Are the 7 commandments of animalism sufficient to maintain order on the farm? Are there any commandments that you would wish to add? Think about the ones you want to add. Okay? Listen, I'm going to tell you right now, number 2 and 3 are not just, no. What commandments do you think that you should add? What commandments do you think that should be deleted? So, analyzing, using what you've read to analyze society on the same sheet of paper, I want you to think about the essential functions of government needed for a society to be successful. The word function can be thought of as a job. Write down 10 necessary functions of a successful society down so that you can think about what is necessary in order for a society to be considered successful. So, for example, making sure that police officers are fair and honest, making sure that teachers are knowledgeable and well trained, making sure that doctors have necessary equipment and protective gear to treat patients. So then, and I'm going to give you guys some examples, like think about what are the functions of education? What should that look like in order for it to be a successful institution of education? What are the functions of agriculture, where our food comes from? It doesn't come from a grocery store. Before that, what are the functions of agriculture? What are the functions of the health institution? What are the functions of the legal institution? What are the functions of the housing institutions? What are the functions of, environment, clean, safe, uncompromised, untainted? What are the functions of the media? What are the functions of the economy? What are the functions of security? So think, be specific. And then see if your functions just so happen to match any of the rules or the rights by drawing an arrow between them. So, remember that I said that you needed like a fourth kind of column here. So, for example, let's say that your most important rule that you converted into a human right just so happened to match like a function in society that you put here as number 4. Or let's say that like a function in society that you put here as number 1 just so happened to match this human right in number 2. You get the picture, okay? And then I wanted to wrap it up with the beginning of your next set of quick rights. Also a Ben Franklin quote, where he said, "Justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are." What does this mean? Why is it important to be concerned with equity as we are with equality? Meaning, if someone who does not need equity because they have been privileged, because they have been given advantages, why should they be concerned with equity for others? Knowing that it's not fair that all of us get the same treatment, because there are some who are more well off than others. Why should we, who are not affected, be as outraged as those who are affected? Why should we be concerned with what is happening in the jail and prison industry, the prison industrial complex right now, with the coronavirus spreading, in the poor conditions that the incarcerated are being maintained in just because you're not incarcerated? Why should that matter as a human being? Why justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are affected? Think about things that you are affected by and that you are outraged by, that you believe that others should also be outraged on. Think about things that you are not affected by, that you realize that because these are human beings, people should be outraged about that they are affected. So what does it mean? Why is it as important to be concerned with equity as we are with equality? A quick review of your dates. Read chapter 3, do your chart and the small discussion questions that you have. Chapter 3 chart and discussion questions. The 7 Commandments discussion questions will be uploaded as one document, which I've already posted for you. Quick Rights 11 through 15 are also due. I'll just go back to it real quick. Here on the side, you can see it. There's a lot of stuff from my multicultural class here on the side. You can see it. If I click on one of your courses, you can see Animal Farm Chapter 3 and discussion questions due Friday, April 17 in the evening. And Quick Rights 11 through 15 also due Friday, April 17. Okay? And with that, guys, I will do another recording just for like mental health tips, entertainment tips, some health updates, things that different people are doing. I will do that a little later in the week because I have to meet with my multicultural class tomorrow and then my multicultural part 2 class on Thursday. So I'll be doing that later in the week, but I hope that it helps you on where you are and that you guys are keeping safe and that you're keeping centered and grounded. Okay? Have a good week and let me know if